Thank you. Yeah, I think. Thank you, and thanks, Minister, for attending. Always grateful for the Minister to be here, and in fairness to him, he always makes an effort to respond to topicals. So, Minister, look, you're very familiar with this. Actually, as we're speaking, I think the unions representatives are on national radio again this evening, having been on national radio this morning, raising this issue. I'm a member, as is one of my councillor colleagues out in Tala, of the Lewis Dublin Bus Forum out there, and there have been some incidents recently in which bus services have had to be withdrawn. That occurs in other parts of Dublin as well, Cathaoirleach, thankfully on not too frequent a basis, but happens enough to cause some degree of concern to people. So I suppose, Minister, if we were to look at this from the perspective of passengers and drivers, if you're on a bus as a passenger, there is what I describe as, what we get in the Lewis Dublin Bus Forum and what is often raised in the newspaper are those dramatic incidences, culminating obviously in a serious assault, as has happened in Éireann on a number of occasions. What concerns me equally is those low-grade, what I call that menacing level of antisocial behaviour that takes place across public transport, whether it's on Lewis, Dublin Bus, Dart or Irish Rail services. And it's where you're sitting on a bus, if you're sitting upstairs on a bus and there's someone drunk, or not even necessarily drunk but being aggressive, someone worse on drugs. If you're on the Lewis, the issue with it is that there simply isn't provision for the security personnel to stop, search and arrest. They can simply escort someone off the tram. And what we've been calling for since before 2016 is a dedicated public transport police that would ensure, to some degree, that there would be random checks, at the very least, for people, so that the public could go about knowing that they can take a journey, and we're encouraging people to take public transport, in the knowledge that there's always a possibility of a random check across any of the public transport methods at any time that would dissuade antisocial behaviour. Thanks, Cathaoirleach.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Minister.
No number 4.
Pardon?
There's no number 4 today.
I know. I don't know why people submit topical debates when they're not going to be here to take them. But anyway, and I thought the reserve topical was always there to make sure there was 4 topicals taken. Minister, I just want to add my voice to that of my colleague, Deputy Lahart, in relation to the need for you to tackle what is a growing problem on public transport, and that is the instances of antisocial behaviour and assaults. In Irish Rail, up until the 9th of September this year, there has been 570 incidents of assault reported, incidents reported, and 11 drivers assaulted. Bus Éireann last month alone, 4 bus drivers assaulted. Dublin Bus has a protocol in place where drivers don't feel safe, they withdraw a service, and unfortunately that is becoming very frequent. This morning on the Sean O'Rourke show, we heard 2 drivers, one from Irish Rail and one from a bus driver, who gave examples and shared experiences where drivers have been spat at, where a driver was hit with a snooker ball in a sock, where a ticket inspector had 3 fingers broken. Only last weekend on the Sligo line, the train had to stop in Kilcock. It caused delay for passengers for up to 45 minutes while they waited for the Gardaí to come and take an unruly passenger off. Now, Minister, it's not good enough that the workers on our state companies don't feel safe going to work, and it's not good enough that passengers are afraid in certain instances to use public transport, and that passengers are delayed while using public transport to deal with antisocial behaviour. And unfortunately, to date, like many of your commitments in your department, you are failing to act on this. And I hope you will use the opportunity over the course of the next 4 minutes to clearly outline exactly how you plan to deal with this issue.
Thank you very much indeed, Ciarán, and thank you to Deputy Troy and Deputy Lahart for bringing up a topical issue, which is a topical issue. It's quite unusual for that to happen in this House, and it's very welcome that you're actually doing that. As Minister for Transport and Tourism, I have a responsibility for policy and overall funding in relation to public transport. However, as the deputies will know, because I've repeated this in this House many times before, I am not involved in the day-to-day operations of public transport. The safety and security of passengers and staff, including arrangements to deal with antisocial behaviour on public transport, are matters for the operators in conjunction with as appropriate and Garda Síochána. I am, however, concerned to ensure that the necessary arrangements are in place to make certain that the safety of all passengers and staff travelling and working on our public transport network. I'm advised by the Department of Justice and Equality that there are a range of strong legislative provisions available to An Garda Síochána to combat antisocial behaviour, including provisions under the Criminal Justice Public Order Acts, the Criminal Damage Act and the Intoxicating Liquor Acts. An Garda Síochána remains committed to tackling public disorder and antisocial behaviour by working with communities to enhance safety. There were 45.5 million passenger journeys in 2017 on Éireann Éireann, the vast majority without incident. However, I've been advised by Éireann Éireann that the number of recorded antisocial incidents has risen in the last number of years, hence the concern from the deputies and others. Éireann Éireann has been actively encouraging employees to report all safety-critical issues, including threatening and violent behaviour. In the first 9 months of this year, there were 584 incidents recorded. However, Éireann Éireann has advised that antisocial behaviour has receded significantly since the summer, when it would be typically at its highest. Security patrols by the company have increased by 21.8% since 2016, and Éireann Éireann has advised that it has enhanced general security cover and provides for enhanced security patrols for major events. Éireann Éireann liaises on a minimum quarterly basis with An Garda Síochána in major districts. In addition, there is ongoing liaison by Éireann Éireann with employees and their trade union representatives to assess reports of antisocial behaviour and direct security resources based on the issues reported. CCTV is available on the vast majority of trains and has successfully been used on numerous occasions in securing prosecutions. It is also in place in stations. In addition, Éireann Éireann has advised that it has commenced the deployment of onboard customer services on intercity services. While their primary focus will be on customer service, they will ensure a presence on these services to deter antisocial behaviour and to alert security or the Gardaí should urgent responses be required. Both Dublin Bus and Bus Éireann have stated that the level of antisocial behaviour on their services is relatively low and note a declining trend which is positive. Both companies also stress the strong and close working relationships with Garda Síochána. Following representations from the National Bus and Rail Union about the establishment of a dedicated police force for public transport, my department wrote to Éireann Éireann, Bus Éireann, Bus Oireachtas, and the Railway Safety Advisory Council to seek their views. Subsequent to that engagement, I contacted the Minister for Justice and Equality to seek his views as to how we might best address the issue. I've asked that the Minister consider this issue in conjunction with An Garda Síochána, given that the allocation of all Garda resources, including the manner in which Garda personnel are deployed, is solely a decision for the Garda Commissioner and his management team. I will continue to work with the Minister for Justice to resolve this important issue.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks, Minister, for the response. I mean, there's some good news in that, particularly in terms of Éireann Éireann and the deployment of onboard customer services and intercity services. What I would like, though, so appreciate that, and that's kind of passive security all on its own, I think is what's been suggested. While you're not, you don't want to get involved in the day-to-day runnings of any of these companies, you are responsible for policy. I'm just wondering what your own view is in relation to that, given that the bus union has made multiple calls for a dedicated transport police, and they obviously see good reason for it. you know, the CCTV doesn't capture low-grade antisocial behaviour. It does capture a physical assault quite clearly, and you outlined some of them. Could you publish the responses, or let us know what the responses were from Dublin Bus, from Lewis, from Éireann Road Éireann, and from Dart in relation to the letter you wrote to them, and what was the response from the Minister for Justice in relation to same? And just one final point here, like, you've travelled on a bus, Minister, and you've used the tram. There's nothing more scary than being on a bus, and nothing more anxious than when there's antisocial behaviour going on. You're simply trapped. And on a train, at least on a bus, you know there's a stop coming up in 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and similarly with the Lewis. On a train, though, I mean, you can be on a train for an hour, and there's simply no escape. So that's a fundamental point to take on board. Thanks, Cahir.
You say you have responsibility for policy, and I would say that the policy of ensuring the security of the passengers using our public transport and the staff working on our public transport must be a key policy, and that you have responsibility to ensure that we have in place appropriate actions. Not that we're able to prosecute someone who's been caught acting in an antisocial manner or as after assaulting someone, but preventing these incidences from happening on the road. Now, Minister, you have said that it's responsibility for the Minister for Justice and the decision for the Garda Commissioner, but you had no problem in terms of the Judicial Appointments Bill, in terms of the reopening of Step-Aside Garda Station, in putting your twopence worth in relation to their responsibilities. So I would ask you to take on board what the union representing the workers are saying, and to take on board what both myself and John Lahart are saying in relation to the passengers who are using public transport. Only last week, a senior citizen in my own constituency travelled from Connolly Station to Mullingar, and she said she was relieved getting off at Mullingar train station because she was afraid on the train. That's not right, and that's certainly not proper, and you have a responsibility to do something about it, and I hope you will.
Yeah, I fully understand Deputy Troy's concerned about the individual incidents which he's mentioning, particularly when they affect his particular area and his constituents. But he really doesn't expect me to get involved in any specific incidents which happen on railway trains or on buses or on routes of that sort. It may make good copy for his local newspaper to come in here and say that here. But if he expects me to come in and say I'm going to intervene on a specific incident which happens, I'm not going to do it, and I have no intention of doing it. What I've said quite specifically is that is for other people, other agencies and other authorities, and they are well capable of dealing with those incidents themselves. My concern overall is, of course, for the safety of staff, for the safety of passengers, and I have equal concern to the concern which you've shown about the matters which you've addressed here today. My duty is not, though, to interfere when an individual passenger unfortunately has an unfortunate event. My duty is to express my concerns in very, very clear terms to the relevant bodies, Bus Éireann, Dublin Bus, Inroad Éireann and others, if I believe that there is a trend or there are incidents or there is not enough being done for the safety of passengers. That is what I shall do, and that is what I will continue to do. And I will take seriously, of course, any individual representations which are made by yourself and Deputy Lahart. And I've applauded the fact that you're prepared to bring this matter to the House. It is an appropriate place for it to be brought to the House, but it is not appropriate to expect the Minister to intervene into individual incidents in Mullingar or wherever else you come from, and I'm not going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.